Usually muted.
Okay, it is Tuesday, November 16th, and our Finance Facilities Committee will begin. For purposes of the video, I guess it's video, so I may not need to do this, but I will share who the board members that are here tonight. Earl Pickle-Antonio, myself. Oh, we don't have. Yeah, something's echoing, I'm sorry.
Somebody's speaker.
All right, just had to take a little technical difficulty break there. And we have 5 items on the agenda to discuss tonight. The first of which is the October financials. And for that, I'll turn it over to Treasurer Verlinga.
Okay, thank you, Daphne.
Hear anything? I'm sorry, you can't hear?
Okay, I'll try to speak up as best I can. Can you hear me? Okay, so the summary report for the month shows cash balances at 327 plus million. We are at 42 million in the general fund versus about 39 million estimates. That's due to slight increases above estimates for revenue and an underrun in expenditures. Revenues for the month were estimated at 1.4, came in at 2.2 million, mostly due to some tax value settlements that there was a frenzy of activity at the end of, or in the month of October prior to valuations being certified by the state and the county auditor. So for any properties that were potentially being challenged as to valuations, there was companies that were looking to settle with us so that they would give us cash payments in lieu of taxes. So those negotiations yielded additional revenues for the district and kept us harmless for a couple of years going forward. So overall, those negotiations are good things for the school in terms of revenues. Tuition receipts from other districts were realized, but we continue to see lower foundation revenues, and that's due to mostly the House Bill 110 changes that have occurred. I'll talk more about that later, especially in the forecast. On the expenditure side, we are only 1.7 million off of estimates, so 1.7%, so relatively close on a year-to-date basis. Expenditures are underrunning mostly due to the changes for House Bill 10, and again, usually timing differences between actual and projected expenditures. No risk right now that I see in the forecasts for the current year in terms of overrunning appropriations. There will be adjustments, though, made due to the November forecast, which is also going to be discussed this evening. Salaries and wages are slightly underrunning in benefits, but we should be slightly higher than the initial estimate due to changes that are occurring and headcount additions. No changes to appropriations this month or estimated revenues. We are seeing increased receipts in food service since meals are effectively free and we are being subsidized by the federal government at this point. We have an increase in meal revenue from breakfast and lunch receipts so that there should be no potential of any losses. For example, last year prior to COVID changes, we were experiencing potential losses and could have maybe needed to advance money to food service. That was then wiped out due to the federal subsidies. As far as activities, the FY21 audit field work is progressing. They're basically no longer on site. No issues identified at this time. There is a potential reclassification of the self-insurance fund that's being discussed. We had a meeting with the state auditor's office and our financial consulting firm that provides our GAAP financial statements yesterday. So we're moving towards resolution of that issue. Renewal rates for healthcare have been proposed by Medical Mutual. We did have a favorable result due to experience, and there will only be a 5% increase that's being projected for next year for health insurance premiums. And that's then to be held steady for the following year. And account fund activity, GASB 84 requires the potential change in classification of certain funds and student activities and trust funds. Since the district does have some involvement in the management of that activity, the state auditor is recommending that those all be reclassed to other funds. So that will have no impact on the way we operate. It'll just be a classification in the financial statements.
Mike, can you tell me what the nature of those self-insurance fund reclassification are? Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna ask, can you give us a little bit of the nature of the
Reclassification of the self-insurance fund. I assume this is with the auditors.
Yes, I actually raised the issue during this past year and brought it up with the accounting firm as to whether or not we needed to continue with the self-insurance fund. In theory, self-insurance funds are supposed to be internal service, which means we collect dollars from, say, employees and the board to pay premiums. The premiums are then paid out to the insurance firm, and the fund maintains a very small balance. Historically, though, in Gehenna, what happened with the deficits that were realized a couple of years ago, right? There was an excess premium that was being charged to both the board and the employees to make up for that loss. So $2 million was repaid. And since that time, those rates have been in effect for the school district. So we have been building up a balance in anticipation of either returning to self-funding or joining a consortium. And at this point, the question is whether or not the fund still meets the definition of being a self-service fund, self-insurance fund. So if that changes, we would need to reclass the activity back to the general fund and account for it separately, or potentially as another type of fund.
Okay. Well,
So
that fund and the collecting, so when the debt was paid
to pay off the deficit,
Which was when?
which should have been 2 years from the middle of 2018. So it should have been paid off in the middle of 2020, right?
I'd have to look back to when the actual.
Ed's telling me I'm right. Okay, thank you, Ed. And we didn't adjust the premiums for employees or the district. So we're in essence creating a reserve with current general fund dollars for something that we are not implementing. And so we're diverting funds. We're diverting funds from current expenditures for future expenditures. I don't know if Borough realized that that was happening, but I didn't realize that was happening, especially to the magnitude. So I don't know the proper chain of sequence of events that needs to happen, but I would like to right that ship. And the dollars, we need the dollars today to pay
expenses and to stave off a operating levy several years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know where the discussions need to take, if it's at insurance committee, but I can't approve a 5-year forecast that has an expense in it that is not to me, ethically legitimate.
Yeah, so the proper channel would be to,
The proper channel would be to take it through our insurance committee, which is part of our collective bargaining agreement, to discuss our approach. And I think then, have that discussion and see where that lands. I think what you're getting at is we're overfunding on the board side and possibly on the employee side. And I think there's a reason for that, given the history of the catastrophic losses we experienced, but there are reserves now that have been replenished. And so we can have that discussion with the insurance committee in our next meeting. Right. For 2 years, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
So to me, it's like,
we're paying for this restaurant, but we're also paying for this.
Right.
It's just not.
I don't,
It's a valid point.
the insurance committee, and I don't know. I mean, there were a few other things going on in 2020. So I feel like I should know when that loan was repaid, and maybe I did. It's very possible that I did, and I just don't remember anymore. And it is possible, because I'm not on insurance committee, that the insurance committee had a conversation about it, but I agree. I mean, I don't remember the board having a conversation about whether or not to continue to build up that reserve in anticipation of making a change to whether or not we were fully funded or self-insured. And it seems like that should be a conversation that we have, not at the back end, but at the front end of building up that fund. I also, I mean, I understand the premiums get set. I don't even know how that works, to change a premium amount in the middle of a year, although it would have
And
lined
that
up
really
with.
can't occur unless we do an MOU, because those rates are actually bargained and in the agreements.
Right.
So we
We
could
cannot
not
change
change.
those rates.
Unless there was an MOU. I mean, I can't
Mhm.
think that the members, that our teachers and staff wouldn't like to have a premium reduction.
All that I think, at least from my perspective, that I think it needs to be a conversation that we have about what are the options and how do we decide that we want to get to whatever the next plan is. And it sounds like however it was set up from a financial perspective, where those funds continue to go into a self-insurance fund. I mean, that clearly isn't what it sounds like, what shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
So there was, last year, there was some discussion, but because we were still,
We had only been in the fully insured plan for a long period of time. The fact that the
the rates are set and could not necessarily be changed. At the end of fiscal year 20, we had a balance of 132,000 in the insurance fund, which meant that it was
probably paid off
debt in May of 20.
Okay.
The actual loan payment, the last loan payment occurred, I think, in November of 19 before my tenure.
Okay.
But we continued to pay down the deficit until basically the end of fiscal June 20. All right. Since then, we have been building up a bit of a reserve. Actually, July was negative in terms of premiums, but yeah, we have continued to build the reserve since. And again, those rates are in the agreement. They would not have been able to be changed until the next agreement, unless, as you said, an MOU took place. And they currently ship the agreement, and they expire at the end of this calendar year. So in the current negotiated agreement, it says those rates would be in effect until December of 2021, after which time it could be revisited.
Yeah, and so just to contextualize it a little more broadly, we had a 100-year flood year in insurance. We had 19 people who reached catastrophic loss, and our reserve fund was depleted completely. We had to take out a loan. We paid back that loan. The union and the district worked collaboratively. There was a change in makeup of the insurance committee, and we weren't sure what the renewal rate would be. So we wanted to fund it at a level that we could pay for renewal. Generally in insurance, inflation is between 9 and 15%. We got a renewal rate that was very, very good, that was much lower than maybe we expected. And so it's 5% for the next 2 years, which triggered the conversation that from the board that we might be overfunding given that renewal rate. And so since we're fully insured, there won't be, the costs are fixed, and so there won't be a need to possibly overfund. But that is a discussion I would like to have, we would like to have with our collective bargaining units. So our teachers union, our transportation union, our maintenance custodial, and our aides union. It's been a highly functioning committee, and we've, dug ourselves out of a really big hole, and it's been very, very collaborative, and we've solved some big problems. And so now I think it's just to have this conversation, given the renewal rate and given the discussion we've had at the board level, and Ed Thomas is here. He's on our committee, and, I think having that discussion will be important.
I just asked to have it because it's a 6.1 million cost to the board
Mhm.
over the 5 years, which virtually eliminates that levy
Right,
request in 2024, right? So we have to exhaust every possible way
Yeah.
of finding savings
Right.
before I could ethically go to the
Right.
voters and ask for money.
And just to round out the discussion, I mean, you're absolutely right, but it also, most districts, when they bargain insurance, and in the inflation that goes up every year, the bargaining kind of happens over time, right? We had to increase our rates almost by double overnight. And that was a big blow to employees in all of our bargaining units across our district.
Right.
Everything went up. And so, but the good thing is collaborative. Everybody said, yeah, we have to pay more, right, to make this right. And so people were willing to do that. I think having this discussion will be a really good thing. And we'll come back and report back on it.
That'd be great. It's got such magnitude, and
Yeah.
And I appreciate all of the work, the insurance committee. I mean, we've been part of this.
Yeah.
Joining the board in 2016, it was horrible what the rate increase that had to go through. But
Right.
I think we're driving two ponies right now. We have to pick one, and that's what our district should be paying for. So I would respectfully ask that get on the committee.
Yeah. And the point that you make, Daphne, is that we're fully insured. So our costs are fixed. They're not going to go up. Right. And so that's another
And you don't have
wrinkle
to dip
in
into a reserve. Right.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So
Any other questions?
Well, they're fixed current. In terms of what the increase could be, it could go up.
no, I mean, the overall insurance costs, Mike, aren't going to go up or down in the next 2 years because we signed up for a
Right.
5% increase over 2 years and we're fully insured.
Mhm.
So if, I mean, quite frankly, we were shocked that MMO came back with such good, fully insured numbers. I mean, they were outstanding.
It's terrific.
I mean, to the point where our consultant hadn't seen numbers like that. So,
We're a healthy lot here in Gahanna, Ohio. Do you have any, do you want to continue?
And then,
Mike?
just to show a chart or two.
so Mike, I just got a text. They're struggling to hear you on YouTube. So if you could just,
It's hard for me to
Lean in
speak
on-
with the mask too. So,
you can take it off while you're, you can just roll it. Well,
Okay. All right, just looking at our results then on a October year-to-date basis, 42.4 million of revenue, 40.5 in local sources.
Can you make that bigger? There's no way I'm sitting in the room can see that.
That's as big as it's allowing me to go. Sorry. Track, you mean,
Down in the square here.
oh, this? Oh, there we go. Okay, that might be too big. I'm technologically challenged at times, so sorry. Okay, so year-to-date tax revenues, about $500,000 above estimates. The tax revenue sharing and tips, about $500,000 above. Tax settlement agreements, this is where we've seen a large increase above the estimated amounts for the year. So we will see a benefit at year end. We will definitely exceed our initial estimates. Other variances are relatively minor. We go down to the state sources. We're underrunning the state foundation because of changes for House Bill 10. Those changes will not be totally known until sometime in December or January. They were originally supposed to provide final estimates and numbers at the end of October. That did not occur. The state is behind in reconciling the law with the legislation and the funding formula. So we will expect to see some changes in the January timeframe. So overall, again, 830,000 better than estimates for results from receipts from operations. On the expenditure side, 2.1 underrun, mostly in purchase services. $1 million of that relates to, again, House Bill 110 changes. There are no longer deducting for open enrollment, STEM schools, charter schools, and scholarship payments for like special ed scholarships. So those expenses have gone away. And in Gehenna last year, that was about $3.2 million of expenditures that are now being funded directly by the state and not through deductions to us. So again, 3.2 million better than estimates on a year-to-date basis. If we look at expenditures versus prior year, revenues are up 5.8 million, mostly in the tax revenue due to the passage of the operating levy in October of 2020, actually November 2020, and other expense. So again, 5.8 million better than the prior year. On the expenditure side, about 1 million over, mostly in the area of salaries and wages due to step increases and negotiated raises with the unions in the district. We look at our cash balances and investments. About 3.1 million in current bank balances, 55.7 in investments. The yields are anemic and they continue to be until interest rates start to rise. The yield on these will continue to be close to negligible amounts. The only one where we're gaining significant is in the CD investments that occurred over the last several years when rates were higher. And all of our bond proceeds, which account for, and COPS proceeds, which account for the bulk of the cash, are invested again also at very low rates because those need to mirror the draw schedule, and we'll be expending most of those funds in the next 12 to 24 months. Sorry. See if there's another chart that I want to review. Okay, this chart shows a summary of all of our funds as of October. Um, And this just shows versus appropriations. So we are, at 31.7 million in general fund expenditures. I'm sorry. Louder. Okay. All the other funds are typically funded through other sources. So these would not necessarily impact the general fund. There are, federal grants, state grants, ESSER money, which is federal, auxiliary funds, which is used to fund local parochial schools, but we are a pass-through entity. There is no concern at this point because all of the expenditures, not sure how that happened. But all the expenditures are within appropriations and we don't anticipate any issues there. That would be all for.
Okay. Any questions? October financials? Okay, moving on to our owner's rep update on our facilities projects.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Ogden. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great.
Better.
Louder would be better? Okay, yeah, sure thing.
With you.
So my name is Mark Ogden. I'm with Turner Construction. I'm the owner's rep for the Phase 2 capital improvement projects, which is an exciting time for all of us. I was asked to give a high-level overview of where we are right now. So for the high school, does it matter what order I go in? Okay. So for the high school, we are in schematic design. Schematic design is kind of the second design stage of the entire design process. It's an iterative process. We're very close to wrapping that up, and then we'll go into design development next. Okay. The middle schools are basically in the same spot, also in schematic design. Again, another iterative process in which we are going back and forth trying to reconcile cost, schedule with the design, making sure that it's workable and that we have the supply chain considerations and the market conditions all factored into what the plan is that we're going to be approving and launching into at the next phase, which is design development. The elementary schools, we are currently underway. We just started here in November, and we are preparing to have the academic portions of the buildings ready for next school year. The gymnasium additions will follow behind that and will be ready approximately around December. One of the reasons for that is because of the supply chain issues that we've been encountering, which I think everyone's pretty well read into. And that's all that I have prepared for today. In future meetings, I think we'll go into a little bit more detail, more robust conversations about where we are, hopefully be able to share with you some design concepts, as well as the health of the budget and how we arrived at the balance that I was speaking of, where we've got the scope of the project, how it's working for the district and the staff, the students and the like, balanced with the budget and the ultimate goals that we're trying to achieve with respect to the project.
So just a few added. So just a few added things. We are experiencing the same supply chain issues that everyone who's building right now are, and namely structural steel, right, Mark? So
Yeah.
right now, during the pandemic, the materials for structural steel, which are the steel supports in large buildings like gymnasiums, is 14 months out. So not only did they stop making the raw materials to make the steel, they actually stopped making the steel itself. And so with Amazon and Facebook and all the demand that's going on around the world, once we finish design development, or we'll be able to kind of order 14 months out, but that is a huge issue in terms of timing. The other major supply chain issue, or it's really a labor issue that everyone is, I think there's something like 2 million jobs in multiple sectors that have gone unfilled. We also are anticipating a struggle to find subcontractors. So for example, Lincoln Elementary, we had one electrical contractor, the new Lincoln Elementary, bid on that project. Which was, so the pricing isn't exactly what you want if the competition isn't, great. So one of the things we're having to do a lot of in the schematic design phase is value engineering, which is just a fancy architectural word for making cuts, reducing square footage. And so that's the work we've been doing. Our high school is going to be closer to 500,000 square feet, which is going to be, the square footage is going to be very, very large. And so like Mark has been just instrumental in helping us sit down and be really decisive about what are our needs and what are our wants. And so that's a process we had to go. At one point, I think with Lincoln Elementary, we were $4 million over. We value engineered it down and we got to a place where it was under budget, and we finished at, it was a $24 million project. We finished at 23.6. So we anticipate being able to do the same kind of thing with these projects, but it's a much tighter market than it was then.
Yeah.
You mentioned that sort of we're beginning Russilli construction. Mark mentioned where we are in each elementary, middle, and high school. Russilli construction has developed with Judy Hengstebeck, our communications coordinator, packets to deliver to each home as we start both Blacklick and High Point. Fencing will go up around those projects in the next couple of days. And so there'll be a robust communication, and Judy will do the same thing she did for Lincoln Elementary, have one pagers that just sort of announce exactly what's happening with each project on a regular basis. We actually have architects in the building right now, designing as we're speaking. They were here all day. They were here yesterday, and it's an exciting time. It's also a time that's definitely fraught with challenges, and we're really appreciative for Mark from Turner Construction. He has really helped us stay focused, and he is the one who went through the value engineering exercises we've had to do recently on the high school and middle school. And our team, Scott Lofton, Jill Elliott, Jessica Williams, Aaron Winter, Brad Barboza, Robin Murdoch, Steve Tart, and Kathy Earhart, and Kristen Groves have been working tirelessly on these designs. So the elementary, we've said this multiple times, but just so everyone knows, the elementary deliverables for the fall of 22 will be the classroom academic wings, not the gymnasium parts. And the reason, again, is the structural steel problem. And so those will begin in December of 22 and be finished by the spring of 23. So we hope to finish our middle schools by the fall of 23, our additions in all three. And the high school, it's going to be a challenge, but we hope to finish by the fall of 24. That's the timing one that's in biggest question right now. So did I get out of my lane, Mark, or am I okay?
Oh, no, you did a nice job. Thank
Okay.
you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you're in a value engineering process with the middle and the high schools, does that mean you have drawings that you're basing that value engineering on?
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. So the process, big box drawings. Yeah. They're schematic. I mean, that's which basically means you have room layouts and adjacencies and sizes. You may know the mass of the building, the building height, how it's situated. So you do have those level of drawings, but you need to stress test it from a budget perspective. And you do that through very high level cost analysis or schematic cost analysis. And then with the next stage, it's an iterative process. So you go back and forth. So we'll make recommendations on how to cut costs, how to save time. And then the architect will go back and reconcile that and redraw that schematic level design. And then we'll back punch it basically and validate that they hit all their marks. And if they didn't hit all their marks, then we got to go back and make a few more suggestions on how to cut costs. And then it's that iterative process that takes a little bit of time, but it is a starting point, or the starting point rather is that initial schematic design. But before you go into DD, you want to make sure that you've checked all the boxes. You've got the cost box checked, you've got the scope box checked, you've got approvals from folks like yourself who feel as though it's time to move on, and that this is a working plan that we can move on with. And then you go into DD and everything gets a little bit more refined and robust from a design perspective.
Okay, well, because I mean, I do have a concern. I feel like we were shown a schematic that showed the stadium being bumped up against the residential property. That's not good in my opinion, right? I mean, we have the southern part of our parcel that is adjacent to commercial apartments. So they're appraised commercially, they're taxed commercially. It doesn't affect their value nearly what it would maybe, right? So I guess if we're looking at a schematic design based on what layout, that is concerning to me. I'll just be honest, because I don't feel like we've crossed that hurdle yet. And I will be a strong advocate for moving that stadium to the south side of our property.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how we do the value engineering. And it's just not logical to me.
Well,
because
so-
I'm
so what-
an accountant,
I-
you have things in mind.
So one way to look at it, we need 100 classrooms at the high school at 950 feet, 950 square feet. So that gives us a number. We know what roughly we're paying per square foot. And so that tells us, okay, that, you know, what, 15 million or whatever the $1 million it is. And we just worked through that process, gymnasiums, orchestra, and we just try to get the big numbers and make sure they work first before we start to drill down on what the shape of the building is, what it's going to look like, where it's going to be. So it's really making sure that we can match our numbers, the 158 million that we have budgeted
Yeah.
for that high school.
And
So-
most of almost all of the value engineering has been strictly focused on the building as far as where the building is situated on the site relative to the stadium and where the stadium goes. None of that has really played into our value engineering process. As a matter of fact, the only site scope element that has been talked about from a cost saving strategy is how do we detain stormwater? You know, we have an area of disturbed area. So what's our stormwater detention strategy? And that's really the only site scope element that we've talked about. With kind of certainty.
So we have folks from the neighborhood that's directly the cul-de-sac, right? Severn Road, right behind the stadium. And I think you guys came to maybe speak tonight. And so we'd love to hear from you. I think the best way to do it, because we're streaming on YouTube as we're talking. And so we can place a computer, there's a computer at the podium. And so if anyone would like to speak, they can, he's signing her up to speak. Okay. So
The other thing before we open it up for, and Daphne can open it when you're ready to do that, but do you want to talk about the
yeah, so what we propose to do,
yeah.
we want to hear from you tonight, but what we propose to do is have a listening session, possibly at Middle School South in the library. Invite you in with our design team and our owner's rep, Mark, and perhaps people from our construction team. Listen to what you have to say and then bring it to the design team to look at the ideas and thoughts that you have. So I think it would be meet with you, meet with our design team, and then meet with you again on solutions that we might have. So does that sound like that would work for you? Oh, sorry. Does that sound amenable to you? If we could schedule a meeting, it would probably be after the Thanksgiving holiday. So the week of when we come back the 29th, and then meet with our design team to talk about the things that we heard, and they would be present at the meeting as well. Yeah. No, we would communicate it to the neighborhood. Well, I think there's a number of ways we could communicate. I mean, you guys, we could have a sign up genius, and anybody who wanted to come could come to the meeting.
I just want to make sure, my question was, how are we communicating? Because I wanted to make sure that the communication wasn't just going to go to district families. There's a lot of people that live in the neighborhood that don't have.
Right. So what I'm proposing is possibly, and this is just an idea, sign up genius, so that people from the actual neighborhood that want to sign up.
How would we get that to them? Right.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Right.
Well, what are your
Right.
ideas in terms of communication?
Biggest thing is communication is not just posting a sign up.
Okay.
I would say community engagement, communication starts with, going to the neighborhoods, speaking to the people. not
Okay.
necessarily waiting for us to come here, but also taking that opportunity to go.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this like unnecessarily formal, but it is
Yeah.
really difficult when we don't have camera and microphone in here.
So you want to start where you were from the
Sure,
top? Yeah.
certainly. I'm Ty Savannah Monkle, an alumni
Yeah.
of Gahanna Schools, 2004, and a resident over at 60 Savern Place. One of the biggest concerns, especially in our neighborhood, is how information is being communicated and how engagement is occurring. To be frank, we didn't know of many of these updates and the proposed phase 2 options for the high school building project until we stumbled upon it. And then we did our homework, we did our research, we did our due diligence to watch the videos, to watch the updates. And what was very frustrating is hearing how much community engagement had taken place up to that point. Yes, the survey did go out. Yes, the survey did go out asking, what do we value in a building? But at no point, the direct neighborhoods that were greatly impacted by this project, at no point were they reached out to. It didn't happen until someone spoke up and said, hey, I see that there is a thought exchange. Can you please reopen that to anyone who wasn't able to participate in that? And graciously, that happened, and I appreciate that, channel being open, reopened, so we could voice our opinions. But I think it's going to be more important to, if we can do door hangers for Blacklick, if we can go door to door for student board, or school board campaigns and levy campaigns, by golly, someone better knock on these doors.
Okay.
And ask the neighbors and inform the neighbors and talk with the neighbors of what the plan is. Because though we have a great contingency here tonight, this isn't everyone.
Yeah.
And we know that there are people who are still uninformed. And I think that is the biggest issue.
So your idea is to knock individually on every door and hand someone a flyer for a meeting?
I mean, even if it is hey, here's a door drop of information and please come and
Okay.
there's the invitation to Middle School South.
Yeah.
Or if you want to put a link to your sign up genius, that's fine. Truly, I feel like it should just be an open invitation. We shouldn't be setting hurdles and hoops for people to jump through
no one
or to-
plans to do that, certainly. But sometimes it's tough to get to people. So I think your idea of going door to door is a good one. I think the sign up genius, I think we can fit like 60 people at Middle School South. So if there's more than that, then we would find a bigger venue. But the sign up genius was just to have it was just an idea. It may not be the best idea.
Right. Again, it's great to get a list of who's coming, but I think we need to do a better job of inviting people to the table.
I agree. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, and we'll definitely communicate that, and we'll give people enough time so they can come out, and we will have our design team there to be a part of it so that they can be listening as well.
And may I ask, I know that, and thank you for the update on the building project. I know that you said that the first stage, if we're getting ready to wrap that up, the schematic design, and just to be clear, that does not include deciding on a layout plan. Is that correct?
will include the floor plans, like where the walls are inside the building.
Mark, I think you're
just
on
not
mute.
the layout on the property. Is that correct?
Yeah, not the, right. It involves the layout of the building, right, Mark?
Yeah, it involves the layout of the building. That's probably the most important thing. But there are a lot of things still very valuable.
Can I ask, because I know, as we've said tonight, it's kind of an aggressive timeline that we want to get started on this building
Yeah.
project. The goal is by 2024. Where does this engagement now fit in regards to that timeline of decision making? Because I would hate to have conversations when decisions are already being made or finalized. Like, where do we fit?
No,
in
I
that
think the
timeline?
timing is good. I mean, I think we need to get it in quickly. I mean, for sure. But it's not too late.
That's good to know. All right, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. But I want, to keep in mind that the major part where your neighborhood sits is the major part of where we're going to build something, right? And so it is a big field, and it is the major part of our site.
Right.
And so keep in mind, something has to go there, right? And so the deliberation will be really on what, right?
I think that's
As long
gonna
as
be a
we
matter of
understand that.
which one is preferred. And
Yeah.
I think, none of it is maybe what we moved in anticipating when we
Yeah.
purchased our
Sure.
homes. However, I think there are better solutions than others. And I think that's what we want to
Yeah.
hash out.
And there are also things, technology tools that are pretty amazing that can measure sound, light, all the kinds of things that you're worried about. I'm sure the sound decibels, the light
Ears and
spill.
eyes also measured those, and we can already see the lights and sound
Yeah.
from the stadium.
Right.
But yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that work has already begun. We were briefed on that earlier today. So just know that we're going to come and listen. And I mean, we could try to get it in before the Thanksgiving holiday, but I think it's a compressed timeline. It would have to be Monday or Tuesday of next week. And
Well,
that might not give people enough time.
I'm trying to figure out, I mean, I'm not sure if you're even talking about the week after Thanksgiving.
The 29th, yeah.
I'm wondering if sending mail is going to be a quicker way to reach people at their door than,
Well,
Especially since there's older people.
it's not that many houses.
okay.
You are.
I just want to make sure.
It's a very
Yeah.
walkable community. Savern Place is, you're right, not a long walk to do,
Yeah.
but now this is impacting more than just Savern, that the potential of moving a stadium up against the property line, that now impacts Johnson Court.
Right.
That now impacts Southwind and that neighborhood as well, and maybe Fleet Run that runs alongside the apartments. And I think it's a bigger canvas than maybe we might anticipate. Though we were able to get our most immediate neighbors here tonight, I think more people are impacted besides just us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think,
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, come on
No,
up.
no, don't.
my name is Kimberly Price, and I live at 115 Savern. I agree with everything Ty brought up. Those are big concerns for us. We moved in April, which we had already lived in Gahanna. We relocated because it was a nice neighborhood behind a school. We have a young son. He will be going to the Gahanna School District. And we voted for the levy. We were all for getting new schools for these kids. I understand there's been a lot of work and thought and effort and blood, sweat, and tears that have already gone into getting where you are at this point. But to Ty's point, it has almost felt a little cloak and dagger for us, knowing that we had to dig and scour to find any update on the phase 2. We knew it was coming, and we knew that field was most likely going to be the prime spot for it, which my house does back up right to the field, which my toddler loves going out there, especially seeing the band practice. But to Ty's point, eyes and ears work really well. And if you just walk through our neighborhood during an event, especially one where the band is present, you will see how loud that stadium already is. And I did send an email to the board, and I attached a picture. It was past midnight. Those stadium lights were still on. You can see them from our windows, even with blackout curtains, they still light up a bedroom. And if that stadium was even closer, Could you fathom trying to sleep like that? Could you fathom trying to sleep through that sound? I have a toddler, he goes to sleep at 7:30 at night. That's right at kickoff. That is insanely loud already in a house. And if you put that stadium right at a property line, there's no way he's going to be able to sleep. And I know all the elements of sun and mental health were brought up in your presentation. Sleep deprivation is even worse. And I know I'm cranking if I don't get sleep.
Yeah.
Dealing with a 3-year-old that's not getting to sleep is even worse.
Yeah, I know a little bit about the sleep. Yeah, exactly.
I behoove you to please, like when you're looking
It's
at
hard.
these designs,
Yep.
to stray away from the option that's putting a stadium. Because I'm sorry, but when I heard that line in the presentation that the good neighbor option was to put a stadium next to a residential neighborhood, I physically was laughing because
Mhm.
that is insane. That's not a good neighbor option. Like that's the furthest from it. And I would just implore you to look at your space layout to maybe do an L-shaped design, to have a sound buffer and a light buffer. Somehow use your building to deflect that versus putting a stadium right in someone's backyard. That's all I have.
Everybody signed that. We only signed one. We already signed one. Not everybody else. Only 4 people. I missed it. Well, I know. Some people might miss it. That's all.
Yes, please.
My name is Valerie Wiggins. I live on Johnsville Court. Lived in the same house for 50 years. And I live at the other end up by St. Matthews. And I guarantee you I can hear the band and the screaming of the football player, not the football players, with the fans. And I don't mind that because I'm a pretty good distance away. What I am concerned about is the cost and how it's going to be funded. Can anybody tell me that? Moving the football field.
So it would be part of the package.
How much is this going to cost in total then for the high school?
So in our presentation.
Get off mute here. On our presentation, Mark and Turner Construction, we did an analysis of what it would cost to move the field. It involved lots of different things. Like if you're going to build a new high school, the current field would have to be updated somewhat. So there are costs associated with that. And so, Mark, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about, but we can get into more detail when we actually have this listening session. But I think it was about 1.5 million to move the field.
I don't know anybody here. I don't know this lady here. I don't know what her position is, but she was concerned about cost.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about cost.
Yeah.
This past year, my taxes went up $800. To me, that's a huge hit. And I don't know what those taxes, how much of it goes to the school, but I guarantee it, a good portion of that went to the school. And that has something to do with how you have a surplus at this point. And I hear you talk about, well, we're going to have another bond issue in 2024, or you would like to. Is that correct? What were you talking about?
We have a potential for a deficit spending in 2024 that needs to be addressed.
So she was
So we're
addressing.
gonna have to change where the football field is.
Yeah.
This football field has been upgraded, what, 3 years ago? You put in field turf or whatever. You put in seating and what have you. And after this amount of time, you want to move it.
So the new bleachers that were put in, I think 7 years ago, would be utilized and moved to the new spot.
About the field.
Not the field. You couldn't move the field.
How much would that cost?
I think the total number, Mark, you gave us was an estimate of about 1.5 total.
Yeah, the
I can
premium.
save you 1.5 total real quick. Don't do it. Okay, that's real quick. You got plenty of room to build a new high school. I might suggest. I don't think so. I don't see why anybody else here would. So that's my point. Don't start screwing around and making the taxes go up because we already have a football field. It's already bad enough for these people. And they're willing to put up with that if you don't move it to their backyard. So I asked you to do that. And while I'm here, I'll make another pitch. Let's fix our sidewalks in the neighborhood. They need it badly. Fix our sidewalks.
That's a city.
I'm talking to people.
Oh, okay.
Hi there. I'm Karen Worcester and I'm on Sovereign Place and I am right behind the field. So those lights have been up every game. They go right through my windows and the sound. But one of the things, in addition to having it in back of my yard and having even more sound and more lights, is having it back in my yard and have the garbage that comes. I mean, I pick up so much garbage now. If it's behind my house, I'd feel like a garbage man having to pick up garbage all the time. And that's in addition to the people that I foresee trying to jump the fence to go to the games or from the games out. And I bought the property because I liked it, but I don't want to share it with people jumping my fence and picking up garbage. That's in addition to the lights and the sound. So that's another thing that I'm hoping you're going to look into.
I've been in Seventh Place for 12 years now. My frustration was a union rep. I represented 8 employees there. One thing that I learned in my frustration was you must communicate all the time with the people you're dealing with. I am very appalled at how you people have to communicate this. Not what you're going through it anymore. I found out 3 days ago from a neighbor of mine that's just what's going on. So if anything you learned tonight, communication shouldn't be with people around your area. Don't think about how we're going to do it. Don't want to make a decision here. Tell us how you're going to communicate with when you communicate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, my name is David Rivera. My name is David Rivera. I'm right on Heaven's Corner, the house right next to the school, elementary. So due to living right in that house, my concern is the traffic. Maybe you haven't addressed that, but I had a problem in the past, like when they're having games, football games and all that, people park literally on my yard or even on my driveway. Then during school hours, we're not allowed to park on the Severance place. If I have visitors, I tell them, you gotta park in the school and walk to my house. So I'm pretty much concerned what's gonna be when the high school is gonna, it's gonna be more student, bigger, and how the traffic is gonna be. Just a thought.
Have you gotten better so we can have elementary middle?
It has, well, it kind of got better, but at the same time, my driveway is kind of limited. If I park a little bit closer to my to the sidewalk, the cop will be knocking on my door, telling me that you got to move out or get a ticket. I have family members parking on the street next to me, and they got tickets just by parking there. So on game days, yes, on game days, yes. They even use my front yard to park.
Thank you for sharing.
All right.
Thank you.
Add that to our concern list. Okay? Appreciate it. Anyone else? On the far side.
My name is Joan Rovnak and I live at 600 Johnsel Court. So I'm down toward the Savern end of Johnsel. But the traffic, the parking, people on game days park all the way up Johnsel. And so and the eyes and the ears, I've got the lights, I can hear all the plays of the football games. So we really do need communication. I sort of liked your idea about a letter. Because if you knock on people's doors, they probably aren't going to be home. If you just put something on their doorknob or whatever, but I think a letter, people had a better chance of getting it. And I'd make it sort of bullet points so people can think, this is important to me. I'm going to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I struggle with this. I know in my home, there was a property adjacent to us that was trying to do a variance and they used letters to send to all of the adjacent property owners for us to come to a meeting on a certain date to learn about it. And I just feel like maybe to replicate that process because people are familiar with it might be good. I'm also willing to go door to door to put a door knocker thing on the day before, just as a reminder for, like the day before. I'm happy. I'll do it without question. So I think over communicating can't be a problem, right? So I'd love to engage as many people as possible. Any other comments with regard to the owner's rep update? Okay, one room schoolhouse on that same property.
All right. So we've had some difficulty in getting companies to give us, a cost on moving the one room schoolhouse. Moving it, picking it up off the foundation and moving it down the street to the Historical Society is not easy because of the low wires here, on Havens Corner and Granville Street. It's tall enough that we would have to potentially move you basically swing them out of the way, some of the traffic lights. So it's taken a little bit longer than we had hoped. But we're hoping that this Friday we will get a set of bids in to let us know what that potential cost is to move the one room schoolhouse. They have to talk to AEP, to Huawei, to Spectrum, anybody that has a wire going across the road. You have to coordinate that. So it's been a big task, and it just keeps. We just had to add an extra 2 weeks to it so that we could make sure we get a good solid number. So that's currently where we're at with the one room schoolhouse. We hope to get bids this Friday. Nobody bids on it, we'll have to take a look at different ways to make it enticing. So
I have a question. So are you in regular communication with Carrie Hawk? Because she reached out to me.
Yes.
And I think the expectation was after our board meeting, I'm not sure, she doesn't know our committee process, and she was wondering when she was going to get.
Yeah, let me address that.
Okay.
So just to build a context, we sent out a request for proposals to companies to bid on moving the one room schoolhouse. We met with the Historical Society, the Gahanna Historical Society, which is on 19 South High Street. They requested, the opportunity to have the schoolhouse moved to that area where there's the Lily Stone, the log cabin, and it'd be a great area for it. And they have space right next to Lily Stone for it. And they came to our last board meeting. Carrie came and spoke and was excited by the opportunity. we are not quite ready to make a recommendation to turn it over to the Historical Society. The district would have to pay for the transport of the schoolhouse. The Historical Society doesn't have the funds to do that. It's going to be a big cost. And as Scott kind of laid out, the complication of moving it is it'll sit high on a flatbed truck and wires will have to be moved. And that will be the bulk of the cost of moving it. It's not very far. It's less than a mile it's just right down here and to the left on High Street. So I think what we're going to be doing is making a recommendation that we give the schoolhouse and the operation of it, all the contents of it to the Historical Society, and that we would pay for the moving of it. What's a little bit unsure right now is we're not sure how many companies are actually going to bid on this process. There's not that many that actually do this kind of work. We hope we get some bids. We've actually had to extend the deadline because they've needed more time to get in touch with AEP and the city and to work all that out. But I think it would be a really good thing. Right now the schoolhouse basically operates in a limited way with third graders who study community history going in there. If it's by Lilystone, then it will be open much more for the public. And, I can't say enough about the passion for history and Gahanna history in particular of the Historical Society. I visited the schoolhouse. There's just amazing things in there. And Carrie proposes to catalog everything, to, keep records of everything. And the Historical Society proposes to actually take all the contents and store it while it's being, moved and a foundation is laid for it. So
my only question is what kind of communication? have
so
we
we'll
had
let
with
her know that we haven't, we haven't.
I don't think she has a clue what is going on right now.
Yeah.
She thought.
So I've been communicating
Okay.
with Brian Larrick, who's in the Historical Society. And he's been communicating with Carrie, but I can reach directly out to Carrie about
I
the
think
RFP.
he's out of town, actually.
Yeah. So we can, I can reach out to her.
Okay.
Sure, I have a question about the schoolhouse. Would you mind coming up to the? Thanks, I know it's really awkward, but we just want to.
Make sure that anyone who's watching the meeting is able to experience all of the comments.
Hi, my name is Sharon Cremeen. I am in charge of the schoolhouse and have been for the last 8 years. And I am totally invested in that schoolhouse. One of the reasons is that I have lived in Gahanna long enough that was my garage growing up. So I've lived in Gahanna over 50 years. I am a Gahanna graduate. All my children graduated from Gahanna. And right now my 2 grandchildren are Gahanna students. So we have been invested in the school district for a very long time. Tom Gregory has also spent a large amount of time setting everything up and getting the community involved. A lot of what is in that schoolhouse was donated by people in Gahanna and really, again, have a vested interest in what is going on in the schoolhouse. Not only did we have every third grader in the school district go through, as of right now, any high school student that we have who went through the Gahanna system has been in that schoolhouse. We had high school classes that came through when they were studying the time period. We had middle school students who from special ed came through. We have had multiple groups that have come through wanting to know about the schoolhouse. It has been open to the public, and I open it anytime that somebody wants to do it. One of the reasons is I live very close on Johnsel Court. So I'm here couple different reasons. And I have lived in that same house for over 40 years. So that area is very important to me, and that schoolhouse is very important. So to just give it away without talking to some other people who are involved, I just feel like I need to have a little input, and I would appreciate your listening to my side, and more than just today as well, but that schoolhouse is very important to me. So thank you. I do have a brochure if anybody wants to see it. If not been in it, this is what we give out to every student who comes in. It has the history of the schoolhouse, how it was built there. And I'm hoping that every student who gets one would take it home to their parents. So I have one more if anybody wants one.
So Sharon, I think I've been in there while you were teaching.
When I was there.
You were teaching, yeah.
I was part of Susan B. Anthony.
Yep.
We would have first person, people associated with Ohio come through. I was part of Susan B. Anthony's group. I was Elizabeth Kate Stanton, and we went to the women's right to vote. And boy, we sure missed out on 2020 because that was 100 year.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Getting right to vote. But we made sure the students understood that.
Yeah.
And there were many parents who said they really missed being in there, or that was their favorite part.
Yeah. And I did originally, when this all started, when we knew we had to move it, I did sit down with Tom Gregory, and we got a lot of background, and then also Jan Elsie, who was a big instrumental.
Right.
And
that's all in that booklet, so.
yeah, so I apologize for not including you, but we'd be glad to meet with you and Tom and Jan. And I think to hear your perspective, I know that you were a big part of it, and that house was moved there basically brick by brick, right? No, it can't be. That's why we're trying to find out if there's a company that can actually do it.
Being a teacher for 20 years.
Yeah.
At Lincoln Elementary, my entire family went to Lincoln Elementary for a generation. Lincoln Elementary, and then, to be a school mom at the schoolhouse. And we had all retired people, many work for the school moms. I know, but I might not be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you come over?
Very, very great. I guess if you don't move the football stadium, you don't move the school.
I have a question. I wonder if there's any kind of grant money at the Ohio Historical Society level that we could access to help with the move. Yeah.
I was on mute. I don't know. We could check into that.
Yeah, we have a couple.
Yeah, we have a couple Gahanna residents that are employees at the Ohio Historical Society, so we might want to tap them to do that.
Shay Reed, our HR director, is here tonight, and she has done a lot of work looking at our administrative salary schedule, looking at all of our positions, not just administrative positions across the district, to see where they are in the market. Right now, we know that it is really a difficult time to hire employees. We are short every day, bus drivers, aides, teachers. And we started the year, I think, 14 short of alternate instructors and some special education teachers. And so Shay has worked really, really hard to study what the market has, where the market is compared to our peer districts. So we study 11 different districts, and we looked at data, and we looked at where our administrators were on the salary schedule. We've just collective bargaining agreements with our teachers, with our aides, with our bus drivers, and with our maintenance and custodial staff. And our administrators have not been, that we don't have an administrative package yet for them. And so what Shay is going to present tonight are her strategies for looking at the market, looking at things like recruitment, retention, sustainability. And she's done a comprehensive study into, so tonight she's going to give us sort of an overview of what she's done and recommendations.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Shay.
I'm going to try to present here. Oh, no, wrong one. Sorry. Wrong one again. Okay. So as Steve said, it's kind of interesting because we actually embarked upon this study last spring. So I think it was around the April timeframe that we entered into a contract with Romberg Stover and Associates. And they are a firm, I think they're in Illinois, but they do studies all across the United States. They do a lot of work in Ohio. They've actually worked with 80 different school districts in Ohio to take a look at their compensation packages. So I was just thinking back to the point when this study started in April, and I feel like we're already in a world of difference in terms of employment from where we were when we thought about getting this started. So it's interesting, and I'm really thankful that we were able to have this because I think it is going to have a huge impact on how we're able to recruit and retain our employees moving forward. So there are really two goals of the study and the compensation recommendations that we're going to make. First, our goal was to ensure that our current GJPS administrators and administrative professional employees are paid equitably across the organization and with consideration for the relevant job market. The second goal was to ensure that we have the ability to attract and retain the highest caliber of administrators and administrative professionals into the future. So a lot of times when we talk about compensation, we really think about the salaries that people are taking home. And what we strive to do was really look at total compensation, not just the amount of money in their salary, but what are the other benefits that we're able to provide for our employees, and how does that come together as a total compensation package? So a couple of these are like the driving factors for our work and the reason behind what we were trying to do at that time. First of all, I asked the administrative assistant in the HR office, when was the last time a study like this was done? And she's been in her job for 16 years and doesn't know of any. So we went back and we feel confident in saying that it has at least not been studied in the last 20 years, which is a really long time to not do a market analysis on salaries and compensation. As I mentioned, recruiting and hiring, I feel like gets more difficult every single day. Certainly has gotten harder in the last few years, and we are still in November hiring for the 21-22 school year, which really, I mean, it never happens. So, and not just hiring many positions right now for this current school year. So looking farther into the future, this is just going to become a bigger and bigger issue for us. I don't see it going away in the near future. So it's good that I think we're taking action now. Again, we want to remain competitive, and we really want to give consideration for total compensation, not just salary. We know that just for our administrators, we don't typically have a ton of turnover for our administrators, but we know just in the next couple of years, we're likely to lose at least 5 of our current administrators, which is quite a lot for a district of our size. Our administrator salaries, this is a really crazy thing that happened, but our administrator salaries are currently operating on 2 different salary schedules. So depending on when you got hired, you are on one schedule. And then if you got hired at a different time after 2013, you're on a different schedule. So we have created inequities in our pay between our administrators and administrative professionals because of the fact that we operate on those 2 different salary schedules. As you can imagine, that also creates frustration for our employees because they feel that that's not an inequitable system as well. So again, those schedules, when they created the second salary schedule, that was back in 2013, And when that happened, again, there was no study, there was no market data that was utilized to make those decisions. So they were somewhat arbitrary decisions that were made when those schedules were developed. As Steve just mentioned, our bargaining groups this year have gone through and we've bargained their salary and compensation packages. All of our bargaining groups have 3-year contracts now, which is wonderful. So we were able to collect at that time some of the relevant data about the market and really use that in driving those conversations through our negotiated bargaining agreements. Also, we gave our classified staff the same raise that our teachers bargained for the next 3 years. So they've already received that 3% raise for the next 3 years. However, we did include those salaries within the study. So that's something that we're going to go back and take a look at and make sure that we're comparing that to the market data to see if any adjustments might be worthwhile looking at for those employees as well. Ooh. All right. So these are the 11 comparison districts that Steve talked about. When Romberg Stover started the study, they said, who do you compete with? Who's taking your teachers? Where are your employees going? What are the districts around the area that you feel like you really want to be competitive with? And so the ones that we selected were Bexley, Canal Winchester, Dublin, Groveport Madison, Hilliard, New Albany, Olentangy, Pickerington, Reynoldsburg, Upper Arlington, and Westerville. We kind of make a joke about it, but you might notice that Worthington is not a part of the list. One of the reasons that Worthington is not a part of the list is they don't readily publish their salary information. And so it is really hard to get comparison information from them. We did get some information, but it was not included in the study. I just pulled a couple of statistics that I saw recently that I thought were relevant to the current trends that we're seeing in employment. There was some research done by Sylvia Allegretto at the University of California, Berkeley, and Larry Mitchell at the Economy Policy Institute. And they found that in 1996, educators were paid 6% less than other workers with similar levels of education and experience, and also with similar characteristics to their job. And by 2019, that gap had grown to 20%. So you can see there's a disparity there between what's happening with other markets and what's happening with education. And as you can imagine, that's probably only going to continue to get worse as everybody continues to clamor for employees in different industries. The other statistic I pulled out was from the RAND Corporation, and they reported that the pre-pandemic average of teachers stating they would consider leaving the field at the end of the school year was 16%, and that has grown in the 21-22 school year to 25%. So 25% of our employees are considering leaving, not at any given time, by the end of the year. So it's something to really be concerned about, and it's something to think about, in terms of not only our compensation packages, but just making sure that this is a really good place to work and that people feel valued every day. So this is one part of it. It's a big part of it, but we know that there are other things that we want to focus on as well. So Romberg was able to put all of that information. They took all of the data that they received from those 11 districts and put together our comparison analysis. And so what we found was for administrators and administrative professionals, our salary range maximum, so the maximum amount that we pay for each position, is about 6.8% below median market levels. When Romberg completes his study, he always uses median. And so you're going to hear me say that a lot. What we noticed when we looked at the beginning and ending salaries is that many of our salaries started a little bit higher, on average about 9.2%, but they end lower. And so what that means for a lot of our employees is by the time they're getting to the point where they're thinking about retirement, that's going to have a significant impact on the longevity and what pay they're going to be receiving throughout their retirement time. So it's a really tough position to put our loyal employees in that have been here for a really long time in their career. The other thing that we found was that of the districts that we looked at, we included what's called pickup on the pickup, was essentially all districts take the percentage that employees would pay into their own retirement and they pick that up for them so that their employers pay it for them. When we included that in our salary comparisons, 93% of our administrative and administrative professional salary positions fall below market comparison. The percentage below ranged from 2% to 56.3%. The overall average for all of the positions was 16.8. So again, that's when you include the pickup in those calculations. Only 2 positions that we found were actually even above market at all. School psychologist was one and the EMIS coordinator was the other. So every other position in our district essentially fell below market. This is what I talked about before in terms of total compensation. We really wanted to also focus in not only on salaries, but on those fringe benefit packages. And so we took a look at what are other districts offering their employees to help keep them employed in their districts. So of the 11 market districts we compared, 100% of the districts had pickup on the pickup in some form. There was not one single district that we talked to, and Mike even made some phone calls, personal phone calls to districts to say, how are you doing this? So we knew that we completely understood, and every single district that is in our comparison group does pick up on the pickup in some form. 5 of those districts provide for full board paid Medicare taxes to all administrators. They pick up that 1.45% Medicaid tax. 7 of the districts provided additional days of vacation beyond we tap out at 20 days of vacation. 7 of the districts paid between 21 and 30, gave between 21 and 30 days of vacation. 5 districts provided some sort of merit pay or performance incentive. 8 districts reported offering tuition reimbursement, and 4 districts reported providing higher cell phone reimbursement rates ranging from $30 a month to $70 a month. So Romberg gave us some recommendations after we compiled all this information. A couple of the recommendations, number 1 was to eliminate that grandfathered salary schedule. So to get rid of those 2 different salary schedules that we have our employees working on, which is a tricky thing to do. But what he did was he developed new salary schedules for us for all positions. And those salary schedules are very consistent in terms of there are 15 different pay grades. Between every pay grade, there's a 7.5% differential. So very consistent between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, all the way up. Every pay grade also has a 24.9% range width. So again, as our employees are moving through their steps, they're getting a very consistent percentage as they're moving on. Our new salary range the new salaries that he created for us, the salaries are minimally above median market. They're 3.2% above. So we didn't go, crazy off the charts with raising the salaries. The salaries are actually fairly consistent. We just made those ranges really equitable. To further increase the compensation competitiveness of our packages, Romberg also recommended a few other things based on the analysis of the fringe benefits. He recommended including some additional pickup of retirement, like we talked about, doing pickup on the Medicare tax, doing different cell phone reimbursements, vacation days, and then I put professional memberships and tuition reimbursement. And one of the things that I've been sharing along the way is most of those things are not new. They're just things that weren't clearly communicated to our employees so that they understood that those were benefits that they even had available to them. So along with the benefits recommendations that we're making, I've created a guideline book so that every administrator and administrative professional will have access to the information to know what benefits are available to them. So we took all of those different fringe benefits and put them into tiered benefits packages. So not every position is getting the exact same thing in terms of their benefits. It's based on level and kind of how we group positions within the district. So they'll have different levels of those things depending on their position and what package or what tiered benefit group they're in. And then the last thing that we did, one of the things that we've been hearing more and more is that many of our administrators are working during times when they have breaks, summer breaks, Christmas breaks and such. And part of that is my fault because we're still hiring. So many of them are working throughout the summer because they have open positions. And of course, they have to be available to come in and hire. So what we did was we took some of those key positions and we essentially expanded their work days. Most of our principals were only working. Don't ever tell them I said that. Cut that out of the video. Cut it out. They were working, their contract said they were working 220 days. There we go. We know they were working many, many more days and not getting compensation. So our idea was create their contracts as 260-day contracts, let them take their vacation time when they actually can take their vacations. And so that, it's a little bit of a trade-off there. So for some of the key positions, they will have additional contract days built into their contract as well. So that is the big picture of what we did with the Romberg study and the recommendations that we'd like to make to the board. I know Mike is going to talk a little bit about the financial piece in his 5-year forecast, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have about the study.
I just want to say thank you for all of the work that went into this. I know that it started with a conversation about looking at the salaries and looking at really the structure that we have in place and making sure that that structure kind of reflects the growth of the district. I want to say thank you for kind of expanding that, and really the idea of having the administrative handbooks with all of the information that our staff, I mean, like you said, all of that information was kind of out there by word of mouth, or if they knew to go to the right place on the, I don't even know what the internal internet is called. I should know what, is it the intranet? Right. Thank you. Okay, so some places have a goofy name, but intranet, if they happen to go to the right place on the intranet and find it. But I think the idea of having the administrative handbooks that have all of that information in there, I mean, that's a great update to the system and the structure that we have in place. So I appreciate you expanding it. I guess the request to do that part of the project too.
I agree. I think it has to be very difficult, because you could have a principal and an assistant principal and they were on different salary and scales, right? I mean, that was just.
It was
very
actually a
difficult.
principal doing the same job as another principal on different scales.
Right.
It's
And
completely inequitable.
we need to fix that. So thank you for all of the work on that. The vacation piece though is the educators and the principals that I've known struggle to take that vacation. Is there a way that we can encourage them to take that vacation for their mental health? Because a lot of times it ends up being this lump sum vacation that is paid out at retirement, but the concept of vacation is to refuel during the journey, not at the end of the journey.
I think the next step in this big process, the second part of the study was a staffing analysis as well, to see what our staffing levels look like and where we might need to make some adjustments. And so I think that's probably where we're going to get into some of that, is making the jobs more manageable and just better aligned. In some cases, we had a point in time, I can't remember what year it was, where we cut a lot of positions, from central office, and I'm sure other places as well.
2016, right?
2016.
Yeah.
And so what happens when you do something like that is, it's like, well, who can take this and who can take that and who can, because the jobs still need to get done, but they get farmed out in ways that may not make sense. And so what we're trying to do, I'm working on job descriptions. Part of the study, I should say, with staffing was a survey to all of our staff to say, what doesn't make sense in your world? What does make sense in your world? Is somebody doing something that you feel like you should be doing, or vice versa? And so I've been really pouring over that data now that we've kind of gotten through the big chunk of the compensation piece, to see what people were saying about their job structures and figure out if we can realign some things to make it make better sense and be more efficient. The study said we're short some staff, which we anticipated. However, we can't just hire, if we hired a staff member every time somebody said they needed one, we'd all be run out of talent. But
with that being said, part of the 5-year forecast is taking some of that position audit information into consideration and
right.
Adding some positions to help with that workload.
But when we're doing that, we are also realigning. We are also taking a look at job responsibilities and looking at, again, what makes sense, and try to make it more efficient, be more efficient with what we have as well.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is the district has grown tremendously, really, when you think about it, from the time, well, if there's never been a study then it's grown tremendously without anyone ever sitting down and looking at. But in addition to the growth that we've had, I mean, technology has changed a lot of jobs for a lot of people. And I'm just, I mean, we're probably a little bit beyond the time that we should be sitting down and taking a look at it, but I'm glad that you're sitting down and you are taking a look at it and comparing us to other area districts, and making sure that, again, it's not just the salary, but it's the structure and it's the job descriptions and it's all of the things that go into making sure that this district looks the way that it can best serve students in 2021, 22, 23, and going forward.
Yeah, I think one of the alarming things early in Shay's presentation, what's happening in education and what's happening across the country in every sector, but I think, you know, healthcare and education kind of lead the pack in terms of the number of people leaving the field. So I think on slide, I'm not sure which slide it was, Shay, but 16% pre-pandemic planned to leave the profession of education, whatever their role was. And then the number went to 25% in 2021. And my fear for public education is less and less people are going into teaching, bus driving, aides. There isn't a sector in our world that isn't short. And I think the pandemic has something to do with it, but I think also even pre-pandemic, less and less we're going into education. So you think about the education graduate at 22 that applies for a job. They have to work basically 38 years before they can retire. So they have to, in the state teacher in Ohio, the state teacher retirement system, they can't retire until they have a total of 30 years or they reach 60 years of age. So nobody can do that unless they work 38 years just out of college. And it used to be 30. And so I think these things, staffing, whether it's teaching, administration, transportation, is going to be the challenge of the 21st century. And I think Shay's work kind of, you know, gets at that and builds a structure for us to recruit, retain, and make a sustainable prediction of what our costs are going to be in our 5-year forecast. And so it's incredible. It was a lot of work, and we thought many times, how do we take this double salary schedule that didn't really make sense, and how do we fix it? And the only way to fix it was to do what Shay did, which is just dig into the data, do comparisons, partner with a consultant, and to really kind of figure out what was equitable, what was sustainable, and what was going to really set us up for the future. So thank you for your hard work on that. I know it was in the midst of the hiring season never ending, right? I mean, so it was a lot of work.
They say some things you can do with an evolution and some things take a revolution. And I think you employed the revolution and it worked. Okay, we are down to the, so just to finish up on that topic, on Thursday night at our regular board meeting, we are voting to accept the proposal, correct? The recommendations, okay, all right. Okay, and now we'll move on to the 5-year forecast. Doesn't get any more exciting than this. Don't worry, people, we haven't left yet. We're just waiting for technology to catch up.
Okay, this brings us to the last item for tonight's agenda, which is the 5-year forecast. In case anyone, well, for the people who do know and for those who do not, every 6 months, or May and November, school districts are required to submit a forecast for the next 5 years to the state of Ohio by code. And it's basically to disclose any potential shortfalls in funding that are anticipated. And what they typically look for is in the 3rd year of the forecast. If you're showing negative balances, you would then need to implement a plan in order to offset those negative balances. We are not in that situation currently, but we would be in that situation going into year 4 and 5, absent the levy and or changes that we could propose.
Why don't you just take it up?
Okay. So let's see if I can share. Okay. So the forecast is from, oh, sorry, that should have been updated. That is from July of 21 through 26. So that slide was not
I see
updated.
it updated in mine. I
Hmm.
wonder if you have the wrong one open, maybe?
Stop share.
If I knew how to share my screen, I'd do it for you, but I mean, I know how, I just don't think I have the.
Mike, do you want me to try to do that?
Yeah, if you could. Get out of PowerPoint.
So you want me to share the presentation?
Yes.
I have too many things open. Maybe I could do it.
Mine actually does show
21 to 26.
So does mine.
Yeah.
So is this the wrong one, Mike?
That's the correct one.
That's the correct.
He had a different one.
I probably accessed an old file when I initially went in to pull it up.
Okay, tell me when to hit.
To advance.
Forward, all right?
Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So you can advance one. All right, so in looking at our funding, and just to give an overview of some of the major components and areas that we look at, current state budget had frozen funding at FY19 levels for 20 and 21. We also had COVID-related cuts that we endured of $1.4 million and $700,000 for a loss of $2.1 million, which we experienced the last 2 fiscal years. For FY22, the funding formula has now changed, and there are adjustments in the forecast that I'll speak to relative to that. ESSER funds, we've received, initial ESSER was about $900,000, which was expended. ESSER 2, $4.2 million, and ESSER 3, $9.4 million. These are additional funds to be used mostly for things like learning loss recovery, adding on to facilities or issues that are relative to PPE and other things COVID related. So these are specifically COVID related items. It also includes the hiring of some staff, which are being attributed to these funds today. When this funding goes away, in 2 to 3 years, that staff will then no longer be within the district. So that's the funding for that is dependent upon this funding, or the staff is dependent upon this funding continuing if it were to continue. The new funding formula I mentioned in 22 restores our level back to FY19 minimum amounts. And we've kept that consistent for the next 5 years because we don't know yet how the formula is all going to be impacting us because of all the numerous changes they've made in funding components. So for the time being, we're keeping it consistent. If there is a material change, we will adjust the forecast accordingly. We are allowed to update the forecast when material items occur. And the new model basically funds students where they're educated. So where previously they were deducting, providing funding to us and then deducting for students that they would leave the district and go to other schools outside of our district, that's no longer the case. They are just directly funding those institutions. Next, local property taxes. I'll go back one, Steve, please. Okay. Our property tax collection rate has been strong. We initially anticipated that we were going to see a reduction in collections due to COVID, higher unemployment, people struggling with losing positions. The economy has recovered significantly, but we never really did see in Gahanna, at least, that larger decrease that we had anticipated, which is one of the reasons our tax collections remained strong throughout the pandemic. There's uncertainty. Today we do file valuation complaints and adjustments when we see anomalies in market values of properties versus what is on the tax duplicate. So many times, for example, a sale may occur for a business, and we do this for commercial properties, and it's sold in an arm's length transaction at, say, $10 million, but it's on the tax duplicate at $6 million, which is an older evaluation. If that is not updated by the county auditor, we will file a complaint in order to get it adjusted. That leads to settlements that I had talked about previously, sometimes where we do get cash payments from the taxpayers. And then the passage of the 4.25 mil operating levy that's proposed in the forecast will bring a half year of collection in the year, the school year, fiscal year that has passed. So for example, if we're on the ballot in November of 24, we start collecting that in the first half of 25. So we get a half a year collection for fiscal 25 and then a full year in 26. If you delay the vote till May, you also delay collection by 1 year because we would not then collect on that levy till the following January.
You just need to know you have the wrong dates on that bullet point.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
So it should say 24.
It should say 24 and 25. Okay, next slide. We have layered in headcount additions into the forecast to meet expected increases in enrollment over the forecast period. New House Bill 110 funding formula has been delayed until December, so that also, can have an impact here. Jill Elliott and I worked to layer in adjustments to what was in the previous forecast and what we are expecting to increase staffing by for the next 5 years. So there were some additional positions that we will talk about, and we can, maybe when we get to the staffing chart, Jill, we can. The state aid is based on the simulations that were developed back in June, and we are maintaining that funding until we know more information. Learning model has increased food service revenues. We are getting many more subsidies that I spoke about from the federal government, especially for breakfast, where we didn't provide breakfast in several buildings, we now do. And the federal government reimbursements are adding to our food service fund.
But wait, those are not general fund, and isn't the 5-year forecast only general fund?
Yes, except to the extent food service runs negative, we would then need to subsidize it. So I consider it, we would have last year had the government not stepped in and started providing those subsidies. We were running a negative balance, and I was projecting up to about a $300,000
During the
loss.
pandemic.
Yes,
Yeah, we've never run a negative in a normal school year.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just, to me, it's a potential thing that could impact our fund negatively. So it's something I will look at to make sure that we don't have a potential issue. There are districts that do run negative in food service
Right.
regardless,
Right.
right? But we have not had that, we have not historically had that problem. Yes. We'll be increasing the cash reserve another 3 million, keeping with the prior forecast estimate of building up those reserves in order to get to eventually a 60-day cash reserve. And we assume that we will be in full person learning for FY22 and beyond. So no reverting back to distance learning. Next slide, please. When you look at the drivers of a forecast and what could potentially impact it, inflation is obviously one of the factors. It's been relatively tame over the last several years, but as we know, it's been spiking up. So what was in the prior forecast, where I actually had increased those amounts from say 2 and 3% to 3 and 4, I've now increased it to between 4 and 7. 7 mostly in the area of energy, because as we know, fuel prices are up 70, 80%, or 60, 70.
Long-term contracts for that?
Not necessarily in the fuel. Yeah.
Well, I know, I thought for sure we are in a consortium for electricity and gas, right?
We are.
So, and that, what is our time period for when that
I don't,
needs to be
I'm sorry, I
renegotiated?
don't know when that expires, but I would,
How-
I just, in order to be somewhat conservative, I wanted to make sure that we were not going to run short in that area.
So you increased it across the board? Not
Only in the energy area by a higher amount. But I think 4 to 5% is going to be fairly normal in the next year or two for other expenditures.
I mean, I have in the notes that we contract for a several year period, so we ought to have a known. And then there might be years that are an unknown, but to the extent that we have a known, I would assume that would be reflected in the 5-year forecast.
I think I was basing it mostly off fuel because we don't necessarily have a long-term fuel contract where we've locked in
Okay, if
and
you
bought.
just did it for gas, for transportation, that's one thing. If you did it for all energy, that's a different.
Mike, what did you do for food? I imagine it was pretty tricky since the government has picked up a lot of our food service, food purchases, but that might not last through the forecast. So, and I know inflation on food is really accelerating right now. So what did you do for that?
Again, that's, as Daphne said, that's kind of outside the fund right now. We're looking at the revenues received, whether we have enough in receipts to offset current cost and actually building up a reserve again. So that's something I had put in the kind of the overall summary. That next month, we'll be looking at the estimated revenues and appropriations for the food service fund. So I'll be meeting with Megan Schreller to kind of analyze that.
In terms of programs, number of curriculum offerings
Certainly have an impact if we're adding programs that would add to cost. The learning gap activities and programs will be paid from these funds.
Any additional headcount
Could be added to the general fund. And I know there are a few positions that were identified to be added to general fund. Facility expenditures for repairs and maintenance and operating costs are certainly a factor. As we build and expand on our current facilities, those costs should decrease. So with a new high school, you would expect that maintenance will be relatively minor compared to what the old high school has incurred, or like an elementary. So
You should see an effect for next year. How did you work at that?
I did not adjust for it because again, to be conservative, I don't necessarily, it wouldn't be a huge number, maybe 100,000 or that type of thing. But in terms relative to the 110 million of total spending, I don't necessarily adjust for that.
I just, you had it listed as a driver.
Yeah. And then enrollment, we're certainly increasing, so that is an added cost every year for new staff. Well, this chart got messed up. It was aligned when I first put it in. It's just to give you a breakdown or an understanding of what's kind of included in these are two funds. Summer school air handlers, Chromebooks, and those type of things that we could use the funds for, which certainly helps us significantly as opposed to having to use general fund dollars. These are three, excuse me. Next chart, Steve. Same thing, this was aligned, but somehow it's been broken down between salaries, instruction and support service and benefits, purchase services for teachers, tutors, paraprofs. These are for people that we would contract with, say, from the ESC or outside organizations to assist in those areas. And then some capital equipment, other related to learning loss that has not necessarily been 100% identified at this point. Next, yes. The headcount or staffing, in the prior forecast, there were about 44 total positions added. We had district staff, like 15 additional staff. The first number would be FY22. Apologize to why this is not aligned. And then going forward, those would be mostly in the area of teaching. Additional administrators, replacement staff for retirements, so you can see incremental headcount in the certified area. And then of classified staff, which would be mostly bus drivers. There were, I believe, 13 additional bus drivers in the forecast, some maintenance and custodial, as well as aides and a technician. So we're looking at 80 plus additional headcount that are built into this forecast over the 5-year period. Jill, did you want to go into any of the specifics on what those positions are?
Yeah, so we broke the position ads down into 3 categories. The first category was based on enrollment projections, which we looked at general education teachers. We also looked at the percentage of our student body that makes up our special education population, which is right around 17%. And then that gave us a number of anticipated special education students that will be gaining. And allowed us to do a calculation of number of special education staff we need to add, as well as educational assistants and support. Of course, we never know if it's going to be a position add for a general intervention specialist or one of our special programming units. So that was taken into consideration. So in using the enrollment projections, we're slated to get 517 new students over the course of this 5-year forecast. And so that put us at about 20 general education teachers, 6 special education teachers. And we also worked with Sue and Missy then to look at preschool calculations because that's included in our general fund as well. And they're anticipating a classroom add each year over the course of the 5-year forecast. So we worked in for preschool teachers as well as educational assistants. So that's the enrollment projection calculations that we did. We also then looked at the position audit that was done the Robert study. Did I talk loud enough? I wasn't off mute.
No.
No, Mike was not.
Okay. So we were able to take a look at the position audit as well in comparing those 11 districts. Do you want to give an overview
Yeah, so there were essentially 3 departments that showed up as having the biggest discrepancies. When you do the staffing comparisons, it can be really challenging because we're really relying on other districts to tell us what they have, and they don't have a lot of time to do that. So, we take it with a grain of salt, but we were able to get some of those comparisons back. And the 3 departments that came up short with the biggest discrepancies were the treasurer's office, human resources, and curriculum. And with the treasurer's office, there was a difference of 2 staff members total in that department. So do you want me to go through the kind of whys of the proposed stuff now too? Okay. So what we would propose is adding 1 position to the treasurer's office. One of the things that we've really been lacking is really a shared position between human resources and treasurer's office related to leave and benefits. The payroll staff are by job description responsible for the administration of all of our benefits, and it's really just not a reasonable ask of them given all of the other things that they have to do. They do not have time to provide the customer service and the support that our 1,000+ staff members need in terms of their benefits and leave. So this would be a bit of a hybrid position in the treasurer's office that would really be taking care of all of the leave requests, kind of monitoring those things, making sure that we're appropriately reflecting some of that stuff in payroll, also working with our third-party vendor and helping us to administer the benefits. So I think the other thing that's really great about that position is right now, there's probably about 4 different people between our 2 departments that have some parts of leave and benefits. And so staff don't even know who to reach out to when they have a question. So it'll be a nice singular person for them to be able to reach out to when they have a question or a concern. In terms of the human resources office, we came up short-staffed by 2 positions. We are proposing 1 ad for a human resources coordinator. Currently, I'm the only administrator in the human resources office, so I handle all human resources for the entire district. We do have 2 assistants in the office. So primarily, we're gonna be doing essentially a restructuring. It's not just to alleviate responsibilities for myself or for Lynn or for Rebecca. Most of those responsibilities that need to be taken care of are farmed out to other people. Special ed is interviewing all of our educational aides. Transportation is interviewing all of our bus drivers. The business office is interviewing all of our custodial workers. So it's really it's designed to take pressure off of all of the departments and really try to distribute that workload a little bit better. And again, do some better realignment, try to pull some of those responsibilities back into the human resources department. We'll be able to also, our poor special ed director is the Title IX coordinator with us, so we'll be able to pull that back off of her and let her focus on special ed. So lots of restructuring and realigning are going to go along with that position. So we're really, really excited about that. We kind of combined some groups. It was really challenging in the audit to separate special education and student services, because every district calls it something different. They can use those terms interchangeably. They mix and match the positions. So when we got information back from districts, it was just numbers and not names of positions. So it was hard to kind of see where those numbers were falling. But essentially, curriculum was pretty glaring in terms of the differences. They came back short-staffed by 4 total positions, which is quite a lot. So they are managing a pretty large workload with a small group in that department. And then I think there was 1 other special ed student services position that looked to be a little misaligned. So our proposal would be not for this year, because it would be too hard to reorganize curriculum and find those people at this time of the school year. But for next year, consider bringing in 2 additional people to support the curriculum office, and then have some realignment with 2 other positions within those 2 departments, so that again, we can be more efficient and try to get those job responsibilities better aligned again, so that it makes sense. Technology, they came back short by 0.5, so it can be an add to our forecast, but they actually lost a technician a couple of years ago. They actually lost a couple of positions, I think, that were never added back in. So we would propose to add 1 technician back in to their department for next school year. And then finally, the business department, they don't have much going on at all, as you heard tonight. So they came back short-staffed as well by 1.5 positions. So, we're going to be looking at how to kind of reorganize and help Scott and potentially advance some of those roles and again, pull in some different responsibilities and do some realignment with that department as well. And we'll take some of the things off of Jessica too, that have human resources come her way. So.
In addition, administratively, when we opened the new Lincoln, which is much larger, we have a full-time assistant principal there. Well, we also plan to bring in an assistant principal for Black Lake and High Point as they increase their enrollment and have, the additional student load. That then leaves essentially 2 of our elementary schools that do not have assistant principals currently. Goshen Lane and Royal Manor, because they went down in enrollment numbers, are sharing. And so we also worked in an additional assistant principal that would split between Chapelfield and Jefferson to round out the elementary group as well. We know we're dealing with a lot of mental health needs, behavior needs, and the elementary level, everyone has intense amounts of work, but the elementary level has the most number of state mandates, the 3rd grade reading guarantee, the new dyslexia laws, all those types of things coming on board as well. So those are some additional administrative positions. And then the 3rd category was kind of additions. There aren't many of them, but additions to just enhance our district programming and offerings. So we know with the board, we've talked about communications, and so we've worked in an additional communications coordinator to support with that strategic planning as well. We also have looked at currently we brought on an additional campus supervisors to support at the high school. Which are currently paid with ESSER funds, but we've worked in once ESSER expires to maintain an additional campus supervisor at the high school. Just one at this time. That's kind of the good and bad thing about updating the forecast every 6 months. You can kind of learn and it ebbs and flows. So at this time it is one. We also looked at increasing school counselor support at the high school as well, as we're increasing our enrollment. And then taking a look at instructional coaching with a 2.5 add. So what that would do for us is currently we have half-time math coaches at the middle school levels. And we know math is an area that we continue to work on improving. And so it would allow us to have 1 math coach at each of the middle schools. Currently we have a full part of the enhancement program as well.
Did you say additional guidance counselors at the high school? Yes. 1 additional guidance counselor. That's, we really haven't had a lot of conversation about this. I don't remember at one of our student learning and achievement committee meetings, either this year or maybe it's on schedule for next year, when we have the conversation about what does the district do for students and families to prepare them for what comes next.
December 8th meeting.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know. I guess I just wonder, is 1 additional guidance counselor, is that enough to really address those needs? And I'm not asking that we have that conversation right now, but it's been something that I guess I was waiting to talk about until that meeting, but.
So I think it's important to just note that these seem like a lot of ads, but it's over the 5-year forecast. And I think potentially we could need more, given what the pandemic has done, where kids are, what they're struggling with. It is, teaching right now is harder than it's ever been. And I think, we're not going to climb out of this pandemic, for the next, even if it becomes endemic and the virus isn't as dangerous, we still have the wake of what has happened. And I just think that, Shay and Jill, and we've had a lot of discussions and been very intentional about these additions, but it could increase just based on what we're seeing. The angst, the anxiety, the depression, it's overwhelming right now for counselors, for teachers, for families. And so we have to be ready to kind of look at that. The ESSER funds have been helpful with some positions, but a lot of these positions we'd be adding if there was no pandemic.
Right. And
Right.
yeah, and I think talking about, I mean, there's the mental health component of it, but there's also I don't even know how to describe it, just the wellness component and the preparation for families, even without the pandemic. That component is something that I think we have not really accounted for the growth in student population in the district, and looking at those positions and thinking about, even again, pandemic aside, all of the ways that our guidance counselors are stretched to do all of these other things. I'm not really certain that we have the structure in place to support the student population that we have. And then you add the pandemic and all of those issues on top of it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we were talking about these position ads, it's 89 positions, right, over the course of the 5-year forecast, all founded in data and student need and things like that. There are probably 30 other positions we could have had on the list based on requests and just the intense feeling in our buildings at this time. When we think about that type of support, even in counseling at the high school, we have to balance it with, we also have requests that the middle school needs, additional support and things like that. So it's a constant cycle of, listen, reflect, analyze, and try and, kind of map out a good plan. But I definitely think in the next update, we'll be making adjustments for sure.
One other question, just really quickly. I know we added this year at the high school a new position. I can't remember what the name of it is,
Just recently?
Yes.
The dean?
Yes. Is that a position, that's funded with ESSER funds right now?
Currently
Is that?
funded with ESSER. I know Jessica Williams would like to see that continued in the general fund once ESSER funds are expended. I think that's one of the things that we'll continue to revisit.
Okay.
I've had some conversations with assistant superintendents in other districts that have said, well, we're actually going away from our dean positions and doing this instead. So I think it's just a matter of taking a look at how this position is working for us this year and over the course of the next couple of years, so we can make a good decision as to whether, when, and if and when it gets worked into the 5-year forecast.
And I just want to mention just high level that what's really important about this work is it's intentional planning over the next 5 years with at the the nominal, really minimal amount of positions we're going to need, so that Mike and his team can forecast for it, so that we can plan for it, which is something we've been talking about with our 4 fiscal principles for a long time, living within our 5-year forecast. But that's hard to do if you can't predict out the staffing you're going to need based on enrollment. And so I really just commend the work that Jill and Shay and Mike have done, and our whole team has done, just to kind of think intentionally about these things. And we really had tough discussions about needs and wants. We know that we can't just have, add, infinitely, but we're going to be looking at this closely in terms of what we need.
I'm sure Ed could rattle off 3 or 4 different positions. He was shaking his head.
10.
30 or 40, exactly. Yeah. So it's an iterative process, just like Mark was saying.
Yeah.
Very high level view of revenue and expenditures, cash balances. So as you can see, our revenues for the first couple of years of the forecast exceed our expenditures, but then the line crosses, and this is typical of every school district in the state, at which time, when you are somewhat below expenditures for a period of time, you need a levy. You pass a levy and it steps you up to an amount that's back above your revenues. Cash balances are positive out until 2025. And then we go negative in 26. So
There's not a legend on the.
it is very strange that this is not picking up. Yeah. Oh, that would be, yeah. Let me see if I could find.
Let's just
I
keep
mean,
going.
I had it, but
Let's keep
I had
going.
it.
At this point, let's keep going. It's almost 9.
I mean, I had it in the link. So,
Let's keep going. Mike,
okay, I have it right here. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. If this works and if I can.
you're being fired, Steve.
Okay, so this now, if I could share a screen. Well, but I have it open, but now I can't get to the Google thing to share the screen.
Just, I guess, we are going to do the same presentation on well, not we, you are going to make this presentation on Thursday.
Correct.
Daphne is right. It is almost 9 o'clock. We typically meet in committee for an hour. So let's.
Tonight's an unusual meeting, though.
We did have a very full agenda. Maybe let's
Okay.
do the high level through the rest of this presentation because you are going to give the full presentation
Okay,
on
I am,
Thursday.
yes. Okay. So, all right, what this does not show is, in terms of the legends, real estate taxes are 63.2% of our revenues. State funding at about 18.9. So we do get the bulk of our revenues from local sources. Obviously, the burden in Gahanna is more on the districts and the taxpayers in the district than on the state. There are districts where that is completely reversed, but those are usually the lower poverty and inner city type districts that have that formula. If we look at challenges to our revenues, the next slide, obviously the House Bill 110 funding formula and how that's going to impact us when it's finally said and done. Eliminating open enrollment implements payments directly to where students are educated. So that is actually a benefit for Gahanna because we have more students leaving than that were coming to us. And we are seeing lower costs, especially on purchase services due to the transfer payments that are no longer being deducted. So the one other item, this student wellness and success funds. There was a 467 fund that was set up by the state of Ohio. It was the state, basically like a grant. And we used it for counselors and other type of student services. That is going away. Last year was about 467,000, I believe, but they are going to incorporate that into the general fund funding as a restricted line within the general fund. So some of these items that are kind of going away and going to be recalculated will end up in the general fund and just need to be accounted for separately. The next one, which is a pie chart on expenditures. Again, you don't see the legends, but wages are 62%. Benefits are 22% in FY22. Purchase services, 10%. So we are at the point right now where we are at about 84% of our total expenditures going to salaries and benefits. That is approaching an area where it starts to get, it starts crowding out the ability to fund other types of things. If that keeps rising to it goes 86, 88, 90%, that leaves very little amount to spend on all those other services and activities we need. The good thing though, in the forecast, it remains steady at about 83, 84% throughout the 5-year period. We're not seeing it increase as a percent of total. So that we're stable based upon what we've projected in terms of increases, additional staff, and that type of thing. If we were to see that start trending up, that becomes a little more problematic. And then lastly, there's a summary of, well, not lastly, one more slide after this, but this gives a summary of revenues and expenditures by fiscal year, and then cash balances. beginning and ending. So as you can see, we do maintain a positive cash balance, line 7.02 at June 30, all through the period. We do have reserves that we've built up at that point to 21,750,000. If we were to vote the forecast and also proceed at that point in 2024 with the levy, it would add 13 million of additional revenue in 2026, so that the overall negative unreserved would be 5.6 million, and that's due to the effective reserves that we would have on the books. So we would be down to 44 days cash on hand at that point. The last slide kind of gives you a breakdown of the cash balance versus the reserve. And we build up to about 102 days cash this year, 101 days cash in 2023. It starts dropping off to 81.63. And then in 2026, we're down to 44 versus the 60-day reserve that we want to maintain. So we would be effectively 16 days short in 2026. The thing is, the further you go out in a forecast,
Reserve,
the more uncertain it is. I'm sorry.
even with the reserve?
Well, we still have cash, but we are under the reserved amount of cash that we say we want to require. So we want to have 60 days, we would only have 44.
So it might be good to just contextualize this, that in 2016, we developed 4 fiscal principles, and one was, I think at the time, we were in the teens in terms of cash on hand. And so we developed these 4 fiscal principles, and one was to build up our reserves to 60 days cash, right? So I think that's the. I was on mute. Anyway.
This is actually a little bit better than the May forecast that showed, I believe I had said that in May we had 17 days, 55 and 17 days, and we are now up to 81 and 63 in 2024 and 2025, based upon all the changes that are incorporated. So we did get a little bit better through fiscal year 2025. We are still under reserved in the last year of the forecast.
With that elevated healthcare premium.
Yes. So if we
I see you, Ed. I'll call on you next, okay?
Okay, so if we are to discuss making some significant changes to this, or we can wait till like January, once we know what the funding settles out as, well, we could then maybe revamp the forecast if we want to change some of those expenditures, or we can incorporate it into this forecast if we feel, if you think the board wants to change the way the funding is currently occurring.
So let's go, and then I have a couple of questions.
So 44 days, how much is that in cash when you're saying?
Do you mind going over to the thing set?
So when you say 44 days, how much cash is that? Just so we know how much would still be in the bank at that point in time.
Okay, hold on
He's trying to
one moment. I need to.
unshare his screen.
Stop share. Why is it? No, Steve was sharing.
Oh,
Sorry.
your screen.
You want to share?
No.
No.
Okay.
So Mike, I think 60 days cash for context is 2 months payroll, right?
0.6 million.
Yeah.
So Ed, it's 15 days.
Our total expenditures in 2026, 123,285 by 260 times 60. Okay, 28 million. No, that's not.
I'm going with 1.9 million.
44 days cash.
that what you're saying?
No, he's asking how much.
would
44
days cash be? So
cash
when you're
be.
sitting there saying that we'd have 44 days left, I want to know how much money would be in the bank at that point in time. Because a lot of people,
About $15 million.
because a lot of people, while they might understand having days cash, just knowing that that's, again, you want to talk about having money in the bank for self-insurance, but here you're having 15 million in the bank still and saying that you're going to need more money.
Well, but the 15 million, if you look at it in terms of the total expenditures of 123, okay, in that next fiscal year, those funds would be exhausted very quickly if we don't increase revenues.
Okay.
I understand. You're looking at it from both our savings accounts in essence, right?
Yes.
Right. Well, the difference for me is that with the general fund budget reserve, it is available for all or any type of expense that's needed, right? Whereas when we move it out of the general fund into a health insurance reserve fund, the only item that it can fund is the health insurance. And if we are receiving premiums equal or greater to what is needed to pay the expense of that, then that savings account doesn't have a use in a non-self-insured situation.
From the get-go, as long as I've been on the committee, there's always been, for an organization our size, has always been where you want to be.
So I hear what you're saying, and I'm not against a self-insured fund, but we are not on a path for, we consciously made a decision to go to fully insured, right? We needed a known, we didn't have, our ratings would have been crazy to try to price self-insurance. Our stopgap was way too high and way too costly. And we paid out over $2 million+ than we had collected in premiums. So we went to a very safe and known situation. And if we get through the pandemic and all of the elective surgeries and things like that that have been postponed, would it be a good strategic decision to immediately, after those 2 years, when the pandemic hopefully is subsided and we're past it, when those costs may go up, right? Would that be a good time to go self-insured? I don't think so. So that means we're collecting money into an account that we cannot use. And is that the right thing to do for our taxpayers, right? They anticipate that the money that they're paying is being used by the district. If a year and a half down the road, we say our goal for 24 or 25 is to become part of a consortium or self-insured, because a consortium, we'd probably have to put a lump sum in.
Correct.
Then let's make that decision and let's do the financial steps that take to do that. That conversation hasn't taken place, in my opinion, to get us, when the debt was paid off, you would have thought that the premiums would have been adjusted to that were being used to pay that debt. But that didn't happen. So in my opinion, the money that we're setting aside for a plan that we don't have a plan needs to come back into the general fund and be used appropriately. And if we want to, if the insurance committee wants to come to the board and say, you know what, our target's going to be 2025. So we can do some work and we could know what the bogey is that we would need for a number at that time, then we plan it that way. But right now, it's just not a plan, and
Yeah.
it's not reality because we're in a fully insured program. Does that help? Does that make sense?
While there may not have been a discussion, I mean, I'm not sure what, I mean, when we reset when we reset. When the committee went about trying to reset, I mean, the whole idea why we set the premiums where they were was to get back to self-funded. So for the last 2 years, the committee has been operating underneath that goal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we intentionally set the premiums higher. One, to cover a catastrophic, because they said it in the 30 months or whatever, it could have been a 25% increase. So we set it to be able to absorb that. But we also said, in the event that we don't get the catastrophic 25%, that they said that would be the most, then the excess money would be put aside to go back to self-insured. And so the committee, I think the committee has been working under that premise since we set those premiums.
I think one of the things, so two major things happened that I think the assumption was self-insured was going to be the cheapest way and the most cost-effective way to navigate. But then MMO came up with a fully insured rate that was extremely competitive and not that much different, right, Ed, than the self-insured rate when we compared the two, right?
I mean, I don't think we have a fund those rates.
No, but
To seriously entertain that.
no, we didn't. We
When
didn't.
they came back with 5%, it was like, you know.
No,
this
but
will add to, we would have almost 5 million, which was twice as much as what we have in reserves in 18.
we didn't have anywhere near the reserve to consider self-insured. But when they presented the self-insured and the fully insured rates, they weren't all that different. And so it was a no-brainer to go fully insured. And then when they gave us a 5% renewal over 2 years to lock in fully insured, that was sort of a no-brainer rate as well. But I think the committee's assumption was, because in the healthcare field, self-insured, for the number of members we have, the number of insured, has been the most cost-effective way. I think the other thing that happened, besides those really competitive fully insured rates, was the pandemic happened. And so, like you pointed out, Daphne, less and less people were getting knee replacements, so we were using less health insurance. And we actually got I don't know, Ed, what was it called? It wasn't a rebate, Mike. We got $300,000 back from MMO just because our usage rates were so low. So those two major things kind of intervened in a situation where we fully expected that self-insured was going to be the way to go. I think this would be, Ed, a good thing to deliberate with the committee. And I think, there's we should do it at our next meeting as soon as possible. Mm-hmm.
sorry. So you're saying 63,863 was fiscal year 21's total. So on your monthly report, are you including the PUPP in the property tax line? Because that number on the June 30th statement is 69 million.
Yeah, it should be in there. And I'll get you the detail of.
And again, kind of like the electric and gas, if we have a contract for similarly to the health insurance, those first 2 years should be contracted amounts. I think you have, I read the, if I read this correctly, the increases for health insurance are 5% and 8% or something, and we know they're both going to be 5%, right?
It was actually 5 and 0 that I put in.
Zero.
Yeah, the second year was 0%.
I thought it's 5 and 5.
It's 5 and 0. It's 5 for the 2 years.
Okay. I thought it was 5 and 5. All right, I just, whenever there's a contracted amount, to me, that should be reflected in the numbers.
I'll check on the contractual amounts for electric and gas versus the fuel cost.
Mhm.
See what
Okay,
the average of those are.
but I'm also, yeah, I couldn't get past the first line, the first number, because I'm like, wait, that looks lower to me than the May 5-year forecast.
Okay, I'll give you a breakdown of that.
Okay, that'd be great. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Anything else for the good of the order? We can go home.
That's good, because my computer just died.
Me too. I'm on 5%. Thanks for being here tonight. Thank you.
Literally just shut down.